depending upon what part of the world you're in. This is Mike Brooks, Mr. Inside Sales, and I'd like to welcome all of you today to a very special webinar called The 5 Keys to Winning Presentations. And underneath that, I named it Everything You Need to Know to Close a Sale. Well, as you'll see, if you follow the 5 keys that I'll give you today, you will have everything you need to close a sale. So we have a lot of information today, but before I jump into the program, I want to make a couple of announcements first. Number one, I want to make sure that you can all see the screen and that you can hear me okay. So please, hello back, Don, please, in that question box, could you just do me a favor and let me know if you can, number one, see the screen, and number two, hear me okay? I'd appreciate that. Terrific. All right, great. I appreciate that, everyone. That's terrific. Thank you. Number two, you're going to see a variety of specific scripted examples that you're going to want to write down. So make sure you have a pen and a piece of paper or your laptop handy so you can take down some of the word-for-word scripts and examples that I'm going to give you today. So make sure and have that handy. And lastly, at the end of this presentation, I am going to take direct questions from all of you. So if something occurs to you during the webinar, make sure and write that down so that when I have the question and answer session, I can answer those for you. And lastly, I am going to make an offer, an amazing offer that you've not seen before on my very, very best-selling product of all time. So definitely hang around to the end. Only 25 sets are going to be made available. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in. We've got hundreds of companies and individual salespeople on the phone, on the webinar, and I'm looking forward to diving in. So if you're ready, let's go ahead and get started. So let's talk a little bit about what you're going to learn today. The first thing you're going to learn is how to successfully present your product or your service over the phone. Now, many of you who have either worked with me or been to other webinars that I've had know that, hey, in inside sales, you're at a slight disadvantage because you can't see the reaction, the body language. You don't have those visual cues that you have when you're presenting in person. So guess what? Presenting over the phone is a whole different animal. And because of that, you had better learn some techniques that specifically will allow you to compensate for that lack of input. So we're going to teach you 5 keys that will help you do that. Number two, I'm also going to show you what not to do during your presentation. In fact, I'm going to be giving you some specific examples of what not to do and, more importantly, what you should do instead. In fact, if you're doing some of these things right now, I'm going to urge you to correct those for your very next presentation. And next, obviously, I'm going to give you the 5 keys to making your presentations more effective. And here's the good news for all of you. I'm also going to be giving you specific examples that you can begin using on your next phone call. Many of you know, and I appreciate your feedback, that the webinars that I give you aren't just about, gee, here's what you should be doing. I also tell you exactly how to do the things I'm teaching you to do. So you're going to get a tremendous amount of information on this webinar today. And I just want to say one last thing. The information you're going to get today on the 5 keys to presenting winning presentations, this is the result of over 10 years of listening to recorded conversations of demonstrations, presentations by phone across many different industries. And I've heard many, many mistakes, and I'm going to give you the answers or the solutions to those mistakes so you can make your presentations much stronger. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. Get your pens ready. Get ready to go. Let's start with winning key number 1. Here's the very first thing you need to do at the beginning of your presentation. You need to re-qualify your prospect at the beginning. In other words, don't do what many sales reps do. They make the mistake that just because someone is interested or perhaps qualified themselves or showed up for a demo, that they're interested just because they agreed to it. One of the biggest mistakes salespeople make is pitching unqualified leads. And if you deliver a presentation by phone, then I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. All you managers, small business owners, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're pitching an unqualified lead, then guess what? They're not going to buy at the end of the presentation, period. So the very first thing you need to do is re-qualify someone at the beginning. Now, this is especially true if you are given a lead by an appointment setter or given the lead by another team whose responsibility it is to line up closes for you. Again, just because they agreed to a presentation doesn't mean they're qualified. You absolutely must re-qualify at the beginning. By the way, the big bonus, the big benefit here is you're going to learn two things. If you re-qualify properly, you're going to get a better understanding of exactly what their buying motives are. And here's the key. Once you know what these buying motives are, you'll then be in a position to pitch or tailor your presentation to those specific buying motives. And number two, you're also going to get an idea of what potential objections or put-offs are, and so you'll be in a better position to handle these either throughout the presentation or at the end. So number one is you must re-qualify at the beginning of your presentation. All right, get your pens out. Here are some sample statements that you can use to do that. One thing you can say is, you know, Barbara, before we begin, can you refresh my memory and tell me once again what it is you're hoping to accomplish using our new lead generation system? And then you hit the mute button and you listen for the buying motives. Now, if you do this diligently, you'll be surprised at what you hear. Sometimes you may hear somebody saying, well, you know what, we're not really in the market now, but so-and-so said, you know, I should listen. Boy, wouldn't it be nice to have that intel at the beginning of your presentation? Other people will come up with a variety of other responses that are going to give you the keys to what you need to know before you jump in. Here's another statement. You know, John, so I can tailor this demo to the points that are most important to you. Let me start by asking you a few quick questions. And then you begin re-qualifying on the need, on the time frame, on the decision makers, on their budget, on the process of how the decision is made. Again, you re-qualify your prospect. Now, again, re-qualify for that interest, the decision maker in the process. Pardon me, just had a drink of water. So again, number one, the winning key is you have to re-qualify your prospects. Most salespeople skip this step, and then when they get to the end of the presentation, they find that the prospect isn't qualified at all to make a decision. They're not, the time frame, it doesn't fit at all. They may not even be looking for something like this, or they may already have made a decision with a competitor. Wouldn't it be nice to know that at the beginning? That's key number one. Here's key number two. Use a trial close before you start your presentation. In other words, always start your presentation by taking the pulse of your prospect. Now, before you all start freaking out and saying, well, I can't ask the prospect for the deal, I haven't even presented it yet. Of course you haven't, and I'm not saying that you should ask for the deal. What I am saying is you need to use a trial close, and I'm going to give you some examples of exactly how to do this. But what you need to know here, you need to get an idea of what the objections or stalls are going to be that are going to come at the end of your presentation anyway. All right, you're already going to, don't think you're going to be ruining the sale, because I got news for you. Exactly what they'll tell you now is exactly what they're going to tell you at the end of the presentation. If you find out what the buying process is like, and oh, by the way, you should have found that out a long time ago, but if you find it out now, you're going to be able to leverage that information while you're delivering your presentation and position yourself to handle it better at the end. And by the way, again, once you know what it is, you're going to be able to deal with it better at the end. In fact, you may be even able to skew your presentation. So how do you use a trial close? Well, here it is. Here is how you soften a trial close so that you can sound professional. Now, do you remember at the beginning of the presentation, I told you I'm going to tell you what not to say, what not to do. Well, here's what not to do in terms of a trial close. You don't say, well, if you like what you see today, is this something that you'd move on? That makes you sound like a used car salesman. In fact, we're going to talk about tie downs and how to make them more real world, more professional. You don't use this kind of a trial close. Yes, guess what? Your prospect's going to tell you no, most likely. Sometimes they'll say yes. That's a nice surprise. But here's what you should say instead. John, by the way, at the end of this presentation, if you think this would actually help to bring you those extra leads you're telling me you need, is this something that you'd be able to make a decision on today? Now, that's a more in-your-face approach. It's perfectly okay to do. I use it all the time. I love to know where I am in a presentation. But if you want to soften it, you could then soften it by saying, by the way, John, at the end of this presentation, if you think this would actually help bring you those extra leads you're telling me you need today, what would be the next step in putting us to work for you? So you can soften a trial close if you want. In fact, you can adjust all of the scripts I give you today to make them fit your product or service and your personality. But again, do not skip this essential step. You absolutely must not only requalify your prospect, but also use a trial close at the very beginning. Again, you can soften it if you'd like, but you absolutely need to get an idea of what's going to happen at the end of your presentation. Okay, now let's talk about, or by the way, let me extrapolate on this. So if you say, John, if you like what you see here and you can get what you think you can, what we've talked about before, what would the next steps be? Now, if they say, well, I'm going to have to run this by my boss, sound familiar to anyone? This is probably the most common stall of any sales presentation made by phone, and probably in person as well. You get through the whole presentation. You'd like to get the deal sewn up. They may or may not like it or be on board. And at the end of the presentation, you say, hey, let's get you started. And they say, well, you know, I'm going to need to run this by my regional manager. Going to need to run this by my partner. Going to need to check with the wife. Going to need to do what? In other words, again, because you've used a trial close and you've flushed out the initial objection, now you can use a layering question. So you would layer this response with something like, oh, no problem at all, just out of curiosity, how much influence do you have in that decision process? This now, again, remember I talked about that word leverage. This now gives you leverage. If they say, well, you know, I've got, you know, they generally do what I recommend, now you can start furthering the sale. Terrific. That's good to hear. So in other words, if you like this, this would be something that we could perhaps get started on. You can then further the sale when you get to the end and they say, well, now I need to run this by my boss. You can say, terrific. Well, I know that you had mentioned earlier that they'll pretty much do whatever you say. Based on the information you and I have gone over today, what would you do if this decision were in your hands? If they say, well, I think it looks pretty good, then you can say, terrific. Well, since your boss generally goes with your recommendation, let's go ahead and complete the paperwork. Let's get you started on this. Obviously, it doesn't commit you, but it will save time once you get that approval from your boss. And then you can go through the enrollment period or the enrollment process. You follow what I'm saying here? Again, what the job here is to flush out objections or stalls in advance so that you can leverage that information and progress the deal at the end. That is winning key number 2. Pretty effective, isn't it? Okay, somebody said, yeah, I've been there. Of course you have. We all have. This is how you avoid it. All right, winning key number 3, use open-ended tie-downs. Now, tie-downs are a great way to evaluate how your presentation is going, especially in inside sales. Once again, we talked about not having access to those visual cues. You can't tell if they're bored, if they're interested. All you have is your ability to use a tie-down to see how things are going. Now, here's the problem. Most sales reps are still using worn-out, closed-ended tie-downs that once again make them sound like a used car salesman, and they don't get any information. And by the way, that's the big problem. If you're using a tie-down that is closed-ended, which is what most people do, you get zero information, and again, you also sound like a used car salesman. So what you want to do instead is use better tie-downs that are open-ended. And here's the key word: encourage your prospect to engage with you. You have to make a connection. You have to get your prospect talking to you, and then you need to listen to what it is they're saying. So here are some examples. Remember, I told you what not to do. I said, hey, beginning of this presentation, I'm going to tell you what not to do. I'm going to give you specific examples of what not to say. Well, here's one of them. Here's an old tie-down, and that's a nice feature, isn't it? Now, what's wrong with that tie-down? Well, besides the fact that salespeople have been using it since 1959, the other problem with this tie-down is it's closed-ended. A closed-ended statement requires a yes or no answer. That's a nice feature, isn't it? Yeah. How many times have you been there? How many times have you used one of these worn-out tie-downs and the prospect says, yeah, uh-huh. What have you learned? Nothing. Here's something better. How about a better open-ended tie-down? And John, many clients use this reporting tool to judge the quality of their leads and even to measure their closing ratio. Just out of curiosity, how might you use this? And then you hit your mute button. So what this is an open-ended tie-down. Here's another one. Instead of saying, and that would save you a lot of time, wouldn't it? Again, that's a closed-ended tie-down. Closed-ended. You need to open this up. A better open-ended tie-down is, my last client found that they saved anywhere from 4 to 6 hours a week using our new method. Now, let me ask you, John, if you had an extra 6 hours in a week, what would you do with it? And you hit your mute button and let them answer. So you see the difference here. One is a worn-out, closed-ended, yes-no answer, which gets you zero information. The second one is open-ended, encourages your prospect to communicate with you, engages them, makes them feel a part of the conversation, and most important of all, gets them to reveal the crucial information you'll need to help close that sale. Now, by the way, if they don't answer you or if they don't want to engage with you, that tells you something important too, doesn't it? It tells you they may be bored. It tells you they may no longer be interested. You need this information, and you'll only get it by using these kinds of tie-downs. All right, winning key number 4. Build a yes momentum. Let me just say one thing. I want to back up here for just a moment. I can't tell you how many presentations I listen to where the salesperson is talking at the prospect. They're just reading them a book. They're going over one point and another using an old tie-down. There's no interaction. At the end of anywhere from 20 minutes to 45 minutes, they finally get down to asking for the order, and of course they get, well, I'll have to see. I'll think about it. Let me show this to my boss. There's been no interaction. There's been no, and here's the key word, buy-in. You need to build a yes momentum and get a buy-in. Too many closers just keep pitching. If they use a tie-down, it's usually closed-ended, which actually even alienates the prospect. If you don't build a yes momentum, then asking for the sale at the end seems inappropriate. It almost seems like you're hoping for the best. And I've heard that in sales reps' voices. They get to the end of a long, drawn-out presentation and say, so, John, what do you think? They don't even ask for the order. What do you think? And, of course, they get a non-committal stall or brush off. Why? Because they haven't built a yes momentum. They haven't gotten buy-in throughout the process at various stages of that process. So here are better tie-downs and statements to build your yes momentum. John, seeing how you do things now, is this something that you could use, and if so, how? Do you see how I added that and if so, how in there? Make sure and write that down. John, most people would gladly pay for this if it would produce X. Wouldn't you do the same? You know, I know we're a little more expensive than others, but based on what you're seeing so far, do you see how the value justifies the spend here? And then hit your mute button. Now, here I'm going to give you a bonus, and this is one of my favorites of all, is midway through your presentation, I want you to stop and say, John, you know, I've been giving you a lot of information so far. Would you mind sharing with me what you think? Say that again. John, you know, I've given you a lot of information so far. I'd like to just stop here for a moment. Would you mind sharing with me what you think so far? So what you're doing here is you're, again, checking in with your prospect. Using these tie-downs, you are building a yes momentum. So by the end of your phone call, by the end of your close, you're going to know if it's appropriate to say, hey, you know what, John, so for what we've covered so far, and based on the responses and the questions you've had, sounds like this is going to be a fit for you. Here's what I recommend we do. Let's go ahead and get you started with the introductory package of 10,000 leads a month. You can see the results on that. Based on that, you can either elevate to the pro or the other level. How does that sound? You see, because we've now built a yes momentum, you will feel more confident to be able to do that. You absolutely have to build a yes momentum. Winning key number 5, ask for the order more than once. Wow, I'll tell you now. So when I got into sales, somebody told me that the sale doesn't even start until the prospect has said no 3 times. Now, I know that may seem like an old-fashioned way of closing, but let me just make a few comments here. Today's salespeople, and I don't know why this is, but today's salespeople, and when they get to the end of a presentation, they ask for well, first of all, they generally don't even ask for the order. Instead, they just try and sum it up and say, well, so what do you think? Or so do you think this will work? Or do you think we should give this a try? Or would you like to go ahead and give this a try? It's a very, very, very soft close. And then what happens? Guess what? There comes the old stall. Well, yeah, let me talk to my boss. Then what they generally say is, okay, well, when should I call you back? somewhere along the line, somewhere, it seems as if closers weren't taught how to close. They were more taught how to just present something and then see what happens next. I know that's a broad generalization, but I'll tell you now, I listen to hundreds of recordings in a month, hundreds, from various clients, and I hear it over and over again. Let me tell you what I don't hear. I don't hear a closer getting a no and then actually handling that objection and then asking for the order again. Again, back when I was closing, I was told, heck, the sale doesn't start until the prospect has said no 3 times. And you know what? I use that even today when someone calls me to hire me as a trainer. If I qualify them, obviously, and give them the pitch and say, hey, let's get you started. And they say, well, you know, I need to think about this. I don't say, okay, when should I call you back? That's the last thing I would say. If they say, well, you know, I need to think about this, I say, hey, that's perfectly okay. Obviously, you've already been thinking about this for several months. That's why you called me. We've just gone over everything here, and you've told me you haven't made your sales numbers for over a year. You already told me you're desperate for a solution. John, you've already been thinking about this. The time for thinking is through. What you need to do is put me to work for you so we can change this. Here's what I recommend we do. Boom! To close. Well, I'm going to need to talk to my partner. No problem at all, John. Let me ask you this. If your partner said, hey, whatever you say, Bob, what would you say based on what you and I have discussed so far? In other words, you have to close a sale. Sometimes prospects just tell you no. They want to see how much you believe in your deal. They want to see how much you actually are going to believe in this. Now, I don't want you to be a pesky telemarketer. I don't want you to annoy your prospect, but I'll tell you something. If you've done your job up front, if you are working with a qualified lead, then you had better prepare for the objections and learn to close a deal. You need to be asking for the order 3 or 4 times. If they then say no and give you a blow-off, then you can deal with that objection as well. But by golly, if they say no, don't just go away and put the sale in their court and say, when should I call you back? That's not how you do it. So, Mike, how do you do it? Glad you asked. Here are some examples. Okay, if your prospect says something like it costs too much, you can say, hey, I understand that. Let's face it, price is relative to results. I mean, this system is, if this system generated a 10% increase in leads for you, which resulted in $10,000 of additional revenue per month, then the price would be a bargain, wouldn't it? Well, of course. Well, that's been the experience of my other clients, and since I'm sure you like bargains too, let's go ahead and put this to work for you. Now, that's a close. He's not going to get mad at you or hang up on you or call and tell the boss on you. Don't be afraid of this. Your job is to close a sale. This is something that he needs. They're always going to say it costs too much. They've been saying that since the ancient Egypt, right? Back in Egypt, in the markets, they were saying things cost too much. That's the oldest price objection in the book. You can't just drop your price. You have to build the value in it. But you have to close a sale. Hey, you know what? If the prospect says, well, I'm just going to have to pass on this. Some of you may already get that sinking feeling in your gut. Your heart may drop into your stomach. You might start thinking about how you're going to pay the rent, why you ever got into sales to begin with. You all know those sick feelings. You should never have them again. Top closers don't. Top closers expect objections. They eat them for lunch. Hey, that's great. I'm going to have to pass on this. Hey, Bob, I know this is something you want and need, or you wouldn't have spent so much time on the phone with me. Think about it. Since this is a month-to-month service, you have everything to gain from this and not much to lose. Let's go ahead and do this. Go ahead and sign up for the lead service right now. Try it out for this month. And if you get the prospects and the results I've been describing, you'll be very happy you did. And if you don't, hey, you can just go ahead and cancel, and you still get to keep the leads that you do get from this. Here's what we need to do to get you started. And then you go from there. Go from there. You have to close the deal. You know, somebody once said years ago that sales is nothing more than a transfer of attitudes, a transfer of belief. The closer transfers his or her belief in the product and service they're offering, or the prospect transfers his feeling of disbelief to the closer. But either way, at the end of a close, somebody buys. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't want to be the one buying a no. I don't want to be the one buying when somebody says, well, I don't want to do it. Okay, well, I guess I'll go away now. No, 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 no. Hey, I'll just have to pass on this. Bob, you know what? I know that this is something you want and you need, or heck, you wouldn't have spent so much time on the phone with me. I mean, think about it. Since this is a month-to-month service, and by the way, do you see how I'm delivering these lines now like a polished actor? It doesn't sound like I'm reading it, does it? You know, some people say, well, I don't believe in scripts. I'll sound like a telemarketer. My answer to that is you don't know how to use scripts. You know, you don't read scripts, you memorize them, you internalize them, then you deliver them like a professional. Think about your favorite politician. They give a speech. They're not making it up. They're reading a script. They sound great for the most part. Have you ever seen that same politician being interviewed trying to come up with answers on his or her own? They can barely put two sentences together. Scripts are what make you a professional and make you believable. Your job as a professional salesperson is to be prepared for every objection, every stall, everything you're going to get while you're presenting your product and service. And this part of closing is just part of that. I love getting to the end of the close. It's almost like a game. I know they're going to come out with the same old objections they've been using for years. I got to talk to my regional manager. Price is too high. I can get it cheaper somewhere else. Let me think about it. We really don't have the budget. We're not prepared to make a decision. I know what's coming. Heck, I have a rebuttal. I've got 5 rebuttals for every one of those. I memorize them. I can deliver them on cue. It's not a problem. And believe me, if I ask for the sale 2 or 3 times, guess who gets sold? They do. They do. And that's what you need to begin doing as well. Let's do a quick recap here. Number 1, summary of 5 keys to winning presentations. Number 1, you had better start re-qualifying your prospects at the beginning of your close. Number 2, trial closes at the beginning is what you need to start concentrating on. 3, use better open-ended tie-downs. Stop using those worn-out tie-downs. That's a nice feature, isn't it? Wrong. No. Start building a yes momentum. You absolutely must get buy-in throughout your sales process. And then number 5, learn how to ask for the order more than once. Learn how to ask for the deal more than once. And here's a special offer to help you do this. I'm sending a link over right now on my 5 CD series, which I've sold thousands of copies for $249. I'm giving you an opportunity to buy it today for just $99. That's a few lattes for a few months. You can either get the hard CDs or you can get the MP3 files. You'll have them tomorrow. This series is the exact material companies pay me $10,000 to deliver. Limited time offer. For $99, you're going to get 5 CDs that are finally going to teach you how to become a real closer. Number 1, the first CD will teach you how to become a top 20% producer in your industry or office. It's going to give you the 5 rules of top 20% performance that are going to instantly elevate you over your competition. Number 2, this second CD is worth the $99 all by itself. Finally, I'm going to teach you how to cold call. I'm going to teach you how to overcome the initial reflex objections. If you like some of the scripts you heard today, imagine getting a CD filled with how to handle the brush off. I'm not interested. Put something in the mail. Email me something. I'm then going to teach you the real definition of a qualified lead. You know what the number one problem in today's sales market is? People don't know how to qualify prospects. That's the whole problem. They don't know how to qualify prospects. So when they get back to them, they're pitching unqualified leads who are never going to buy. After you listen to this second CD and do what I teach you here, that'll never happen for you again. Third CD, I'm going to teach you how to close sales, and then I'm going to give you exact closes. How to handle all those objections you get. The price is too high. I need to talk to you. We need to think it over. I've got another supply. I'm going to give you a step-by-step formula of how to answer objections so you'll never be afraid of them again. I'm going to give you the scripts. I'm going to model that behavior for you. I'm going to give you everything you need. And then CD number 5, that's worth another $99. I'm going to teach you how to take it to the next level. I'm going to tell you how I moved into the top 1% of my industry, and then I'm going to teach you how to do that for yourself. I'm going to teach you how to change your attitude. I'm going to teach you how to use affirmations, how to change your self-talk, so that when your buyer says no, you go to work. That's your cue to turn on and to become a closer. You're going to get all of this information, either 5 hard copy CDs delivered right to your home or MP3 files. This $99 special is good for the first 25 CD sets only, or for the next 72 hours. And let me just tell you what you do. When you get them, I want you to listen to this information over and over and over and over again, like a music CD. You know how you love that one song you heard on the radio? You've heard it 100 times. You know every word. You can sing along to it. You finally buy the rest of the CD, right? It comes down. You download it. You listen to that first song. You love it. But then the second song comes on. You think, ooh, that's not too good. Then the third song comes on. You think, ooh, that sucks. And then that fourth song comes on. You think, oh, my God, I wasted $15. What do I do? You listen to it again. After you've heard it 10 times, guess what? That second song's not too bad, is it? That third song kind of has a ring to it as well. Then you hear it 100 times. Guess what? It's the best CD you've ever heard in your life. It's your all-time favorite. You've all had that experience. That's called repetition. I guarantee that if you listen to this over and over and over again, you will be more confident. You'll be more successful. You can move into the top 20 and even the top 5 or 1% by learning this information. This is everything I use to catapult me into the top 1%, and it will work for you as well. I've gone ahead and given you that link. It's on the right-hand side. Go to mrinsightsales.com/webinaroffer.htm. You will get, well, first of all, you'll save $150, and you will get the CD program that will change your career. If you've liked anything you've heard here today, then buy this immediately. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and then take some questions. Hang on for just a moment.